Hello and welcome to the Southbound Sports Show. I'm your host, Richie Leahy, here with my co-host, Matty B. For high tempo this week, before we get into the NFL stuff, we have a very heavy NFL show. Although, who knows how hot I'm going to get. I'm probably not that fired up. But I made it to the NC State hockey game last week. They played Virginia Tech. And as I've heard rumblings about trying to get to that next level, there were a lot more people than I expected at this arena. Now, it wasn't a big time arena. It was a small competition center that was away from campus. So I was surprised how many students were actually there. I was also surprised that they served beer at this club hockey game. I tried to figure out how many people that they might have had in there. I would say a couple thousand maybe. But they had their own cafe. So when I got there, a lot of students were already outside drinking beers at this cafe and eating snacks and food. I don't know. I didn't look at the menu to see if they had burgers and stuff, which I assume they did. I saw people with nachos and things inside. And then they just go in. It was half an arena were stands, and then the other half was kind of just the wall where the Zambonis came out. And they turned the lights off. They had an intro show. They had halftime contests. I think they're doing one next week where if you make a full ice shot, you have a chance to win $50,000 or something like that. It might be 25 for two people. And I thought that'd be cool. I don't know how you'd get picked for that, because they did pick someone to do. They had a race between two people to see who could make 3 shots first, I think, at the one intermission. I don't know what was at the other intermission, but I thought, well, this is much better than I anticipated. And even making the jump to Division I hockey, I got a lot of people telling me oh, it's going to cost a lot. It's it already cost them enough anyway for this club team. So they apparently have funding enough where they played in Raleigh on Friday. Then they turned around and drove to Blacksburg. I think that's where Virginia Tech is, right?
Yep.
So they drove to Blacksburg. They played a double header, but it was home and away. And a lot of their games were set up like that, where they played one in Raleigh, and then the next day they're driving on Saturday to Wake Forest or somewhere else. And I thought, they're driving all up and down the East Coast. I think I read the teams off last week. But it is an ACC club division of hockey. And I thought if they really wanted to sponsor a Division I, smaller mid-major type conference in hockey, where only one team makes the tournament or something and tries to Gonzaga it, they could very easily do that in the ACC. So maybe it's not so much about them trying to join the Big Ten. Maybe it's more about getting TV networks other avenues for sports year round. Because you have the ACC network, sure, you're showing a bunch of stuff, but hockey's fairly popular. It gets pretty good TV numbers compared to other sports. I mean, I'm surprised they don't really push golf either, because golf would be another one that I think does good TV numbers, right? Has to be pretty easy. It's one dude with a handheld camera following a guy golfing, right? It's not like they're golfing in poor weather. You're not going to have a snowmageddon. Or it's look at Tiger Woods in this blizzard trying to find his ball. He can't find it. That'd be funnier, but that would never happen. So he has to use a bright orange ball. He's I found it. That just reminds me of Goldfinger, where he pulls out the wrong ball. That old James Bond. But yeah, I don't want to ramble too much on this, but that's my thought, is maybe the ACC is trying to put stuff together to try to increase their presence. Maybe it's not so much of teams looking to leave the conference. Maybe it is just another way for them to approach a Notre Dame that's already in the Big Ten for hockey and say, look, we got all these sports that you do now. Just join us full time. You could beat the crap out of our teams, and you could be the Gonzaga, which is where I was going with it. It's not so much like that a North Carolina State would jump up and be the Gonzaga, or a Florida State would be like making the hockey tournament every year. It would pretty much just be a place for Notre Dame to bloodbath everybody and then be their rep, right? Say, get out of the Big Ten. Don't do that. Come to our conference on Hulu. It's on Hulu now. Did you know that?
No.
ESPN Plus. You can watch the games from the ACC network directly on Hulu. That's my last high tempo thing. Do you have anything for high tempo this week?
This week was happy that the ACC released their schedule for next year. So traveling to Pitt November 4th. Don't know how I feel about that one. Going up to the cold weather. We'll be playing in a blizzard.
I hope they do play in a blizzard. That'd be great. Oh, you sent me Louisville's schedule though.
I did.
That's my fear. Go ahead, break it down for us.
Louisville's schedule is just, when I looked at it, what I thought is that it's going to set them up to just look like complete assholes when they go through. Like, if they can get past their toughest game is going to be the Pitt game, but the rest of the schedule they mow right through it. They don't play Clemson, they don't play Florida State, they don't play Wake, don't play UNC, and they can pretty much mow right through the rest of the ACC, get to a decent bowl game, and then get blown out because they're not going to really play anyone.
You're forgetting Miami and North Carolina State, dude. Those are away games for them. NC State's been rocking 8 wins a year. I don't know about Miami, but they're top talent there, Matt.
And they're tough to beat at their own place, but I think it's still with the way that the conference luck goes, they'll have a really good conference slate, and then they'll get to their bowl game and get blown out by 70.
Well, that's my fear with the Big Ten. And for comparisons, because I'm more the Big Ten guy on the show here, I've been worried about this unbalanced schedule that they've been floating around with keeping rivals. Because like I said, if Michigan gets Michigan State and Ohio State, and for whatever reason they don't give Ohio State like a Penn State in return, it could be a complete cakewalk for Ohio State. In either way, I think both Michigan and Ohio State should have concerns. On the other hand, where Wisconsin can say, hey, we got to keep our rivals in Minnesota and Northwestern alive or something, fools. We have to play them every year. And then they could theoretically have a schedule like this where they miss the Big Ten East powers, draw UCLA and not USC, and then potentially just rip through, and you're sitting there in the championship game, and you get another, what was that Ohio State one where they lost like 55-10 or something? Like, you could get a bloodbath like that. And that's not even a joke. Like, Michigan just beat Iowa that bad 2 years ago in the championship game, right? So you're telling me, like, hey, we're going to do an unbalanced thing, and we're going to have a better championship game, but you got to be careful because you might not get the two best teams. You might get one solid team, or hell, you might not even get the two best teams at all. You might just get two teams with the easiest schedules, right? Because there could also, if Penn State misses Ohio State, and let's say they get like Rutgers and Maryland as their crossovers, and like they don't play Ohio State and Michigan, and they have an extra loss, like an undefeated Penn State could be playing like an undefeated Wisconsin, where both of them miss Michigan and Ohio State, and they both end up with like one loss. Like last year, Michigan dropped one to Michigan State, right? And then they beat Ohio State. In that scenario, if Penn State didn't have to play either of those teams, and they ripped through undefeated, Michigan killed them. But maybe that doesn't happen. Like, or I guess they didn't really kill them last year, but they killed them this year. But like that, if that beatdown doesn't happen, Penn State's in the championship game. And maybe it doesn't matter with the expanded playoffs. And I think that's what a lot of conference teams are kind of banking on. They're like, hey, go ahead and expand it because now we know our best team's going to get in no matter what. even if there's some injuries or they slip up, or like Michigan lost Blake Corum this year, clearly to change the team and hurt them in the playoff. If he's not out, who knows what happens, right? He's coming back next year, and I already see people penciling in Penn State. It's like Michigan hasn't really lost anybody, guys. I don't know if you should be penciling in a team with a brand new quarterback. Because I hear the same people writing off Ohio State saying, oh, Ohio State, they lost C.J. Stroud, so Michigan's going to easily beat them again. But don't worry, Penn State will win the conference because they got a new quarterback. It's like, isn't that the same logic? But I don't know. You're living it because this is the first year, right, without divisions in the ACC? Or am I wrong?
Right. No, this will be the first year. And, I get why conferences try to keep the divisions going because it helps solidify certain rivalry games. But I think as a whole, I think it plays out better doing it this way, that you have a better shot at your, like, I think anymore it boils down to getting your best team into the playoffs. And I think the Big 12 over the last couple of years kind of showed that blueprint that Oklahoma was that team within their conference. It was the best. And even with having to replay rivalry games and stuff a second time, they were still the team that was coming out on top. So even if they did lose a game, it wasn't hurting them because they were able to make that up in the championship game and get themselves into the playoffs.
Yeah, but that was a balanced schedule. What you're showing here or talking about, that's an unbalanced schedule. So it's not going to be Oklahoma getting through. There's a really real chance that you're still going to have a lopsided championship game because Louisville only has one loss because they only played at Pitt and they ripped through the rest of their schedule because it was garbage.
Look, I don't. As long as it's
you
Florida
say
State,
it now. Well, you should write this down. When Florida State misses the championship game next year and the playoff because Clemson plays Louisville in the ACC championship game, I don't want to hear you crying. I was on your side at 9:26 p.m. on January 31st.
Hopefully, they're not. They just win out. Because I think for Florida State, though, the thing that helps them is they're playing Clemson earlier in the year. And
I don't know what the tiebreaker is. I'm just saying if Clemson or if Louisville goes undefeated, Clemson and Florida State both end up with one loss, and Clemson has the tiebreaker. Guess what? Guess who's playing in that championship game? It's Clemson Wake, and then they're not going to put Florida State in with one loss and not a championship game appearance, right? I mean, I guess it depends what happens. Ohio State just got lucky with that.
Well, it's like they open back up again with LSU, so they're gonna be improved. But I think if they survive opening week off again, they have that chance that they're playing Boston College early, they're playing Clemson early. Clemson's breaking in a new quarterback. Like I think that they have a new offensive coordinator. It's aligned where if they're still trying to work through bugs, it plays to Florida State's advantage.
I just don't think with this being a 14 playoff and they've already set the heights that Georgia and Alabama are going to be top two, and the media has already talked about Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State being for real. Like Penn State's already in there, and they used the close playoff losses from the Big Ten last year as proof that the Big Ten deserved to have two teams. So I wouldn't be surprised next year, unless you have an undefeated champ, that we're going to see another conference kind of get passed over for a two-team SEC or two-team Big Ten champion playoff again. Like, I just wouldn't be surprised if it happened. Because I joked with you last year, if Michigan and Ohio State both would have won, would Penn State have had a real argument for being the number 3 best team in the country? Right? They only lost to the top 2 teams, and that was very close to being a reality after they killed Utah in the Rose Bowl, right? Like, that's the hype that's keeping them in. So I think you're going to have 3 Big Ten teams near the top 5, and you're going to have 2 SEC teams near the top 5. I think Tennessee will take a step back, but I think Bama and Georgia, like, realistically, unless they lose 2 games, those 3 teams, which in the Big Ten, you could easily have a round robin. Michigan plays at Penn State. I think Penn State has to go to Ohio State, and then I think Ohio State has to go to the Big House. You could have all 3 of those teams lose on the road, and then who do you put in? I don't know what the hell their tiebreaker situation is, but if you have 3 11-1 teams, I don't even know what you would do, right? Well, we'll see if that ever happens, but I'm just saying, like, for the ACC and the Pac-12 and even the Big 12, everyone saw TCU win, but then they also saw TCU get embarrassed, and there were people saying that, like, they shouldn't even have been in the playoffs, and they kind of ignored the Michigan win, right? Because they saw, like, how many mistakes Michigan had to have for TCU to win that, and then they saw, well, this is what happens when you don't get those mistakes. You get killed. So let's just make it a 4-team. Should have been Bama, Michigan, Georgia, Ohio State, right? That's what everyone was saying. So we'll see. I just don't want to see Florida State get screwed, or hell, even like NC State get screwed because of a weird schedule, because of crossovers. That's my beef. I hope that it doesn't go that way. I know you hate pods, but that's why I thought regional pods were better, because then you could have a championship weekend. Because with the larger conferences now, it's almost impossible. You almost have to do some type of pod, or it's not going to be fair. It only takes one season where Florida State gets ripped off or Clemson gets ripped off because of a Louisville having an easy schedule, and maybe this first year is it, where they say, no, we're not doing this anymore. Our conference is too big. And then you have just 4 pods. And if you have the top 2 teams play in the championship game or whatever, even if it's a rematch, then you at least have another pod battling to send another team to the playoff. That's why I think it's going to be what comes down. Because I think some of the conferences like the Pac-12 and the ACC, they want to get to a spot where they can say, we have 2 teams with 11 wins because we played championship weekend, right? The consolation game and the championship game, those 2 winners, I think you're going to have a situation where they say, we want those to be our 2 reps. What's it face gets a bye, the top number 1 seed gets a bye, and then our consolation winner needs to be in that other bracket. And maybe they have 3 games that weekend, I don't know. Depends how many teams they want to try to squeeze in there. Right? Could you imagine Bama getting a rematch with Tennessee without Hooker last year as like an extra playoff game play-in? The beatdown that they would give them, they'd give them an old Urban Meyer just to make the playoffs then.
Yeah, that's exactly what that would be.
That's exactly what would happen. You know it's true. No team wants to play, because even last year, Michigan State got the better of Michigan because they took Hutchinson's touchdown off the board. They didn't want no smoke in a rematch, Matt. There's no way they wanted to play Michigan again in a rematch at a neutral site. 0 chance. I mean, Michigan was in the championship game, but Ohio State already killed them. Could you imagine if they said, hey, Ohio State, you got to play Michigan State for a chance to make the playoffs again? Michigan State would say, like, there's no way we're winning this game. You might as well just pencil in Michigan and Ohio State in the playoffs, because that's what would have happened. I would have liked to see a rematch, because that was a ass-whooping times 100. Ryan Day might have scored 100 on their team. Maybe that's what he meant. He meant to say Michigan State he'll score 100 on, not Michigan. That was his mistake. But any other thoughts you have on college football before we get to the NFL?
No.
I'm excited. Signing day's tomorrow. I was going to talk about it at the end, but we might as well just start in here. It makes 0 sense to have a signing day tomorrow or whenever it is. I think it's tomorrow. Or it's next week, but it's like, no one cares. Signing day's coming up. It doesn't matter. Most classes are locked in unless you're Florida and you can't pay your bills. And then their quarterbacks are trying to get out of Dodge, right?
Wouldn't know what that's like.
It's like, well, Addison last year, USC had the same issue. But I think it was too late, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, yeah, you're stuck here. And then he didn't even have a monster year, right? That had to be an awful decision for his career.
But
right?
I don't know. Like, depending on if they ended up getting some of those payments through after the fact, or if they didn't renege on some of those.
I mean, yeah, I guess if he was getting paid a big bit, but I mean, just looking at the draft thing now, they have him out of the top 10. He was supposed to be like a top 5 or 10 player, right?
Yeah.
Leaves Pitt. This has him the highest I've seen so far. Oh, that's from last year. They had him at 11th last year, but he came back. Giants selecting what's his mock draft? 23rd overall to the Giants. I feel like that's a missed opportunity, right? Because I think a lot of the hype that Addison had with Pickett got pushed to Caleb Williams now, and you didn't really hear much about Addison. It was more like, well, he can't get open until Caleb Williams like scrambles around, right? And I mean, maybe that's a real thing. So that's where, if you're a top guy trying to move, awesome. But if you're not getting paid, that's where I think you're going to see a lot of signing day stuff like Michigan's been getting, where you're an All-American player at Arizona State or all conference or whatever. Awesome. You want to play in the playoffs? Michigan just made it. We came up short. We could really use you. And we have some money here too, by the way. What player is going to turn that down? Right? And then you don't even have to worry about, hey, here's a falsehood. We're throwing you $13 million to come here. We're giving you a chance to come and win. And then look at our guys. Like, look at Aiden Hutchinson in the NFL, or look at Michigan has like 4 dudes in the Super Bowl playing, including the ageless Chad Henne, right? Chad Henne kept the Chiefs season alive. If he doesn't drive that 98-yard touchdown drive, which I think was it one of the longest of all time in the playoffs, if he doesn't make that touchdown drive, Matt, the Chiefs are probably eliminated. I hurt Patrick Mahomes, right?
Yeah.
Look at them with the Niners with their backup quarterback. They didn't have Chad Henne. Embarrassing.
They didn't have Chad Henne. They almost had to put a running back or a wide receiver.
Well, did you see that? Let's get into it. I don't have it as a second topic here, but we'll get back to the Sean Payton thing. Did you see their reasoning for not putting McCaffrey at quarterback? They said they still wanted to keep the personnel the same for their play calling. And then in the same breath, they complained that what the Eagles did was then just ignore the quarterback. Well, no shit. You're throwing back out there Purdy, who can't throw. So what did you expect them to do? Key in on his keen running ability, Matt? It's not like you had Michael Vick back there and you're like, all right, you hurt your arm, now we're running the option. You're like, we're going to run the option with Brock Purdy. Awesome. His ligament shattered in his elbow or whatever. He can only throw the ball 3 yards. I think he had 4. He was 4 for 4 on completions, Matt. I think that was his final stat line. Because the first one they didn't count as a pass. It was a fumble when he had that injury. Which to me, I mean, give him credit, but it's really embarrassing for him after the game that immediately the rumors are starting like, hey, yo, we need you to have surgery. And by the way, we're talking to trade for Tom Brady. Or we want to get Tom Brady here. Like, whatever it takes. We think we can trade. Who's their other quarterback that I don't like? The guy that got hurt.
Lance.
Yeah, Lance. Trey Lance. So they're thinking that they can trade Trey Lance. They know they're not going to get a lot for him, but they're hoping that they can move him, possibly re-sign Purdy at a lower rate since he's hurt, or whatever. I guess not even re-sign him, just kind of keep him around as backup, and then bring in Tom Brady. Because they said, quote, they ran out of quarterbacks this year. So they bring Tom Brady. They said if they had a competent quarterback, they would have won the Super Bowl this year. This is like coming straight from the franchise. Which is like such a slap in the face to the Eagles. Because weren't the Eagles winning when that injury happened?
They were up at the time, but I don't think that it was a guarantee.
Oh, it wasn't a guarantee, but they're like, they're pretending like the Eagles were a shit team. I've been saying the Eagles were going to make the Super Bowl all year. When I had Devonta Smith in fantasy, I kept telling people, you don't have a wide receiver number 2 that good with an offense that good, and I don't know why people are writing them off. Like, there's a reason why you can't just cover A.J. Brown. Devonta Smith is just tearing teams apart. And then when he doesn't, then Brown goes off, and everyone's talking about, like, oh, Hurts can't do anything or whatever. They had the best record in the NFL. Right? They're not a slouch team. So for people that are just like, yeah, the 49ers were better, it's like, what basis, man? When were they better? Like, did they lose to them in the regular season? I don't think so. I'm looking to see in their schedule. I don't think they lost to them. So then the fact that, like, they ended up crushing them. Like, I don't know when Purdy got out, but Eagles had a 7-0 lead at the end of the first. And then the Niners tied it on McCaffrey. Then the Eagles had 2 more touchdowns right before the halftime. I think the second one was the injury, right? They had a touchdown to go up 14-7, and then they immediately got the fumble and then scored right after, I think. Right? And that's when he went out.
Yeah.
And the game was over. Because I thought the 49ers clicking with McCaffrey, they can't even move the ball, let alone. They're not going to do anything on this Eagles team. And looking at the analytics, the 49ers never had, like, their highest win percentage chance was like 45 early in the game. They really had no chance to beat the Eagles in terms of stats. So I hate standing up for the Eagles, but people are disrespecting them, and I really wouldn't put it past them to just go in and just crush the Chiefs. Because the Chiefs are so hot and cold this year that watching the game with the Bengals, something weird was going on, don't you think?
Yeah.
That game was so messed up that even players and former players are kind of saying, like, the timing and the weird penalties and stuff. And I get it. I saw a lot of Bengals fans putting out, like, clips of, like, holding calls supposedly that didn't get called. A lot of them were just, if the guy's inside the cylinder, he's inside the shoulder pads, they're not going to call holding.
Well, you could call holding every play if you really want to. So, like, I think some of the holding, you kind of
it's subjective. Like, you have to just kind of, but, like, some of them, like, yeah, if he's getting tackled, but some of the clips that the Bengals fans are putting out there, it's like, he's not really getting held on that Mahomes run at the end. He had the guy in front of him. I think what they normally do is, if it's a key situation, you really have to have your guy beat. And they didn't. And then I saw, like, some people even complaining about the 49ers because the Eagles made their defensive line look like a horrible defensive line. I don't even know what other word I was going to use there, but, like, they're saying the Eagles' offensive lines, they're starting early. They're offsides every play because they were dominating the Niners' defense. But it's like, buddy, the Niners' defense is getting tired because they have no offense. And, of course, they're going to be running. I watch Michigan football, buddy. I know what happens in the second half when you're getting run all over. The game's over. Like, you might as well just chalk it in and hope the Eagles don't run the score up on you, because it could very easily been 55-7. I'm not even exaggerating. Like, when they had a 21-7 lead, I've seen a lot of Michigan games where they just lean on their team and just run all over them, and it could have very easily been 55-7 in that 49ers game, because the Niners had no offense. They couldn't do anything. The Eagles could have just moved the ball at will, but they kind of eased up. Because why show your stuff for the Super Bowl, right? No need.
Yeah.
Keep guys healthy. I think they played it perfect. We'll get into our predictions. I'll have to do some more deep dives into some of the stats, but that's my initial reaction. It was almost like The Bengals kind of got ripped off. The late hit out of bounds type thing I thought was an iffy hit, to be honest. He didn't really hit him. He kind of just pushed him at the end. But it's Mahomes. Mahomes runs the ball, which is my other thing. It's like they need to do away with some of the protections. Like Mahomes can't be protected the same exact way as a Peyton Manning. Like if that was Peyton Manning running on the sideline and they pushed him out of bounds like that, I would have been like, oh yeah, they had to know Peyton Manning wasn't running anymore. Like, what are you doing? But like Mahomes, you don't know if he's going to cut it back in, right?
Yeah.
So like the fact that some of the defensive guys, and like that point in time, that late in the game, personally, I wouldn't have thrown that flag, that late hit out of bounds flag. I just wouldn't have. I would have ate it. And if they would have complained and been like, look, he's running the ball. It's the end of the game. Like, what are you expecting? The guy did not hit. He didn't hit you. If he was a helmet to helmet, like crushing blow, then yeah. But that he was behind him, wasn't he? He pushed him out of bounds.
Yeah.
Maybe from the side. But I didn't really. I wish that game would have went to overtime.
I would have liked to have seen it finish in overtime. I mean, maybe I'll eat my words after the Super Bowl, but I feel like it would have been a more competitive matchup having the Bengals be the AFC representative, because I think the Chiefs are only going to go as far as Mahomes' ankles can carry him. And I think if he has any lingering effects, I mean, they're giving him enough time that I think he'll probably be close to 100%. But I think like they were showing through the game, it was hard for him to roll to his left, and so that handcuffed some of your play calls. But you know, the other thing that watching that game stood out to me was how Andy Reid at this point in his career is willing to do some unconventional things that you don't see many other teams do. Like they tried that hook and ladder really early. It was like Kelsey completely whiffed on the toss. They had like one of the little shuffle passes underneath that was incomplete. Like they didn't hit him, but it was interesting to see that they were at least being willing to try to put those types of plays out there, as opposed to some of the more traditional stale stuff that you see from the NFL.
I thought you were going to say he was going to do unconventional things like hire his sons on staff. But I don't know if like I said, the Chiefs are so hot and cold. I don't know if Mahomes is like injury is really going to be that big of a deal. I don't agree that he's going to be close to 100%. If you have a sprained ankle, dude, those don't heal in 2 weeks. The NFL is going to jack him full of whatever so that he doesn't feel it. But what happens, like with the way he rolled it, he's going to lose his springiness. So even if it's not like bothering him, he's just not going to have the same explosiveness like when he's making cuts. And once you get like a couple hits in the game, like that could go either way. But like you're saying, like him trying to roll out and stuff, like when he's making the cuts, I think is really where it's apparent. So for those of you that haven't been injured like that, like when you're trying to go side to side, that's when your leg will just kind of buckle with a sprain, right? And sometimes those linger for like 8 weeks. Like that's one of the worst things to have happen. So I don't know. I just don't know. Like the Eagles, I'm really sold on the Eagles. And I'll have to do some more digging. But I think the Bengals team overall was a better team. That's why the Bengals have beat them 3 out of the last 4 times or whatever. It took this controversy. And like I said, maybe they still win. And it goes back to everything I complain about with like Michigan football or whatever, not calling the helmet to helmet or whatever at the end. Excuse me, and giving Michigan the extra play because they obviously knew there was a penalty. They called it down on the Michigan game. This one, just don't throw the flag. Don't throw the push out of bounds. There wasn't a big hit. Don't throw it, and then let Mahomes complete a pass instead because they still had time. And then that way, there's no doubt. Instead of a 43-yard field goal, Butker has like what, a 53-yard field goal then if he completes a 5-yard out? He makes it, no one's complaining about the game at all. right? They gave them that extra third down for no reason. And everyone said, well, that didn't matter. That didn't matter. That's one more play that the Chiefs defense, or not the Chiefs, the Bengals defense had to play. One more time that they had to run down the field for no reason. So you don't know if it matters, right?
Yeah.
It's all conditioning. Like, it's one more play. Maybe instead, the Chiefs offense is a little bit, or maybe the Bengals defense is a little bit more rested at the end. And they don't have to push Mahomes out of bounds. Maybe they keep him contained. You don't know. So I think that kind of stuff is a big deal. And I'm embarrassed that it happened. And I don't really know what the NFL can do to kind of fix it. I've been a fan of having the officials in the booth. I'm almost at the point where, with all the gambling and stuff going on, you can't tell me that, like, hey, we want to keep this close, or like keep the Chiefs or whatever. It happened in the NBA. You have one official doing weird stuff, Matt. How do you know? And it might not even be him. Maybe he knows that his brother is betting on the game. You go to church and he's like, Chiefs better win, right? How are they going to know, right? Dabo Sweeney's there. He paid for the church, right? The official's right there. He knows exactly what's going on. He gets a little whisper like, Chiefs better win. He's like, all right. And then it's not through him. It's through a church that is not affiliated with Dabo Sweeney or anyone else at all. It's just there, right? You don't know where the money came from. and boom, perfect. And then people are complaining. That's what I think the NFL needs to do, like an outside work. But realistically, like the NCAA, they're trying to survive right now too. And I've thought about this, like they're talking about now where if clients don't, like participate with their interviews or whatever, they might still investigate them. But I thought if the NCAA wanted to really stay relevant, they should take some of their money, because they get a ton of it, and say, we're going to do the officiating. We're going to do it all. That way it's fair, it's across the board. We have enough clout and we have enough money that we can fly officials in and out of games. And potentially, hell, we'll even let our officials work the NFL games or whatever. We're going to have like an actual network of officiating through a third party. Not the NFL itself, but I think they need to have a third party officiating crew. Maybe the NCAA kind of works through the same thing where they're like training people right out of college. You're an ex-football player? Perfect. You know the game. You didn't get a job. You got cut from the NFL team. Why don't you come back through the NCAA's officiating program? Why not, Matt? How many ex-athletes don't have anything to do? Right? You don't finish your degree and you take the money, it runs out. The NCAA has the program right there. Like, do something constructive. If you're not going to go after these schools or whatever and then actually punish them, how about you do what you're supposed to do and support the student athletes? I think if they had a track where it's like, hey, where you have a thing where you can come in, you want to officiate at the NFL level, we'll help train you, and we'll do like a third-party thing through like some offshoot NCAA booster program. Perfect. And guess what? We're actually working with the television networks too, and we're going to have you in the booths so you can actually train being the eye in the sky or whatever the hell they call it. It'd be great. I think everyone would want like a non-biased officiating crew that's just a third party. Can't be through the TV networks because Lord knows they'll be fixing the games. Has to be third party. Like the NCAA could easily be third party and they'd have to just do it open, like open notes. Can't have like Ohio State dudes officiating Michigan games. Can't happen ever. Can't have SEC officials officiating the other playoff game when it depends, like it determines the matchup that their team plays in the championship round. Can't do it. Just have your own officials and not associated with the conference at all. That's what I think the NFL needs. I think they need some type of officiating crew that they can put together. What do you think about that?
I think that would be interesting to be able to have that type of setup. I mean, I feel like in Pennsylvania they're trying to do something similar along what you're discussing with trying to get more high school students involved with like little league umpiring and like the lower level officiating, so that once they get cleared for that and they show that like they have a good understanding of those lower levels, build up into junior high and JV to try to get that pool of officials to build, because there's definitely like that was partly the issue with our games this past season, where there were times where we're trying to find, like, we have stadium availability, but we can't find crews, so we had to look at different dates because of availability of officials for those nights.
But that's where I'm saying, like, the NCAA, they have a relationship with colleges, and maybe it starts with high school instead of the NFL, and they go that route instead, where, hey, we need to train our guys for the big leagues. You don't have to worry about your random high school game in Philadelphia. We have our guys right there that are training at Temple or wherever, right? Most high schools have at least a university or college like semi-close, like within an hour, I would think, right? Maybe two. But I think most of them have like some type, even if it's a smaller school, like the NCAA oversees Division III, Division II, Division I football. It's not all Division I. Some of those guys come out with a degree in communications or whatever, and they have like nothing to go for. You can't find a job, whatever, in your area. Maybe your family lives in the middle of nowhere, but heck, there are high school games. And if the NCAA was putting together resources through like the PIAA, I think they could very easily like work out, just using Pennsylvania as an example, where the PIAA, they take a cut or whatever, and they pay. Maybe is that what does it for football too, or am I thinking baseball? But they pay like a set rate per day. Because I umpired in baseball too. Because once you play in college, that's kind of a thing. They reach out to you and say like, hey, would you want to do XYZ tournament? Have to get it cleared or whatever because you can't get paid or whatever. And once you graduate, it's like, yeah, I'll do it for like 2 years and then I'm done. There's like really no path. There's like no one that comes and says, hey, you want to be official? Yeah. If you want to be an official ump, you got to do all this other BS. You got to drive out to like Philly or Harrisburg. You have to do all this other garbage. It's like, why can't I just do it here? Why can't I do it at the college I'm already attending? You know? And that's where I think the disconnect is. It's like, there's no centralized unit. It's like state by state. And then it's like, hey, can I ump around here? It's like, no, you have guys that are 80 years old they're grandfathered in, son. If you want to ump, you have to drive 2 hours to go to some other XYZ game unless they call off. It's like, I'm not going to be on call to make $45. Right? It's like, yeah. It's almost insane. And then I hear people say like, it's BS, we can't find umpires. It's like, you're paying a pittance and you can't guarantee games. I've done it. You're like sitting on your couch waiting to see if they're going to call you down. And then you're going to have to drive like a half hour to go to the game. And then you're half asleep because you're drinking all night. Like, because you're in college, man. And then they're like, yeah, here we are. Let's go. And you're like, can barely see in the sun. How am I supposed to call this play? And it's like, all right, perfect. But if it was like a legit thing where it's like, hey, you want side money through your entire career, heck, even a path to get called up. It's kind of like the Good Old Boy Network, but it's like not developed. It's insane. You know guys, like you see guys officiating, and then sometimes like you're getting officiated by guys that you used to play with. So you're like out there BSing with them. You know they're not paying attention. That's one of my moves, Matt. Chatting up the officials, right? It's like, what's up, buddy? How you doing? That's why people are like, oh, the officials, they're not really slapping Ohio State's players on the ass. It's like, yeah, they were. And you better believe that they were getting chatted up too, because players know. Hey, they're like, that guy, they like us. Let's go chat him up, man. And they're people. So they're easily going to be manipulated, right? So that's my off-topic rant. I think the Chiefs game Chiefs Bengals really kind of set me off because I'm like, I don't care about really either of these teams. But I know that if that was like the Packers, I'd have been so pissed. The show would have been unbelievable, right? Because I'd have been so close to getting a Super Bowl ring, Matt, and it never would have happened. That's my new goal in life, get a Super Bowl ring through the Packers. Anything else you have for the championship games before we move on?
No.
Well, speaking of good old boys, the Panthers hired Frank Reich. And before I get into the Sean Payton stuff, because this is our coaching change segment, and I'm like, why? And everyone down here is like, oh, absolute win. Great win. And I'm like, you guys are celebrating like you hired Jim Harbaugh. This dude has a 547 record overall. He just got pushed out of like Indianapolis. He got fired after a 3-5-1 start. He coached no division championships. That's why I brought up the Harbaugh thing. Everyone made fun of Harbaugh. Yeah, he hasn't done better than whatever division in Michigan. Harbaugh was winning the NFC West every year and making the NFC Championship game. This dude never made it. He has one playoff win. He's coached Peyton Manning, Andrew Luck. Who else was his quarterbacks? Like, he hasn't been coaching slouches, Matt. So, like, the fact that he's coming in with the winning record, it's not like, hey, awesome, he has a 500% record. It's like, he coached Andrew Luck and Peyton Manning. So, like, what are you talking about? Of course he's going to have a winning record. I could coach Peyton Manning and have a winning record. Like, are you serious? I think he coached him. Maybe he didn't. But maybe he just coached Andrew Luck. But, like, I could coach Andrew Luck and have a winning record, right? So, like, what are you doing? I guess he coached him back as an assistant. That's where, like, they're saying, oh, that's where he really developed his chops. He was quarterback coach of Peyton Manning. It's like, I could have been quarterback coach of Peyton Manning. Could have made films for Saturday Night Live and stuff. Like, did whatever we really wanted to do. Like, that's not like a something to celebrate, man. You were you're the quarterback's coach for Peyton Manning. You did nothing. Even Peyton Manning came out and said, did you see the quote from him where he came out and was like, hey, halftime adjustments, those are just a myth. And everyone's like, yeah, the coach makes them, Peyton, not you. Like, what are you talking about? So Frank Reich, that's the guy Peyton's learning from. Peyton doesn't believe in halftime adjustments. So what the hell is Frank doing at halftime? Hugging him? Peyton's like, yeah, usually I'm just worried about getting a snack and a drink. Frank Reich's like, you need another hoagie, man? You want some orange slices? I'll cut them up.
I'll get more orange slices.
I'll be right back, bro. It's like, maybe one day I'll be hired as the head coach. So that's my thing. He was the offensive coordinator on the Eagles when they won the Super Bowl. That really wasn't an offensive Eagles team, right? That was a defense team, and Nick Foles he did his magic. So, like, I don't think people were celebrating Frank Reich with that win. So, the fact that Carolina, their owner comes out and says, hey, we're getting away from the Good Old Boys network. We're going to actually hire the Carolina Panthers quarterback the first year their franchise existed. Isn't that just the definition of Good Old Boys Network? And the whole reason I'm heated about this is because of last year, we saw the exact same thing with the Raiders, right? They get hot at the end of the year. I can't remember if they made the playoffs, right? They have an interim head coach.
They should have hired him.
Carolina has Steve Wilkes right now, right? He goes on a run. Carolina was dead in the water. They finished 6-6, right? With him as head coach.
Yep.
He turned the team around. So they come in very similar to the Raiders, right? Everyone's like, the Raiders are dead. They have all this controversy. Their last couple games, they beat the Broncos, beat the Seahawks. Weren't the Seahawks a playoff team? Beat the Lions. Kept them out of the playoffs, basically. The Lions. And then they beat the Saints, right? The Saints are kind of going through their own thing. But two teams, Seahawks and Lions, that were in the playoff race, needed a win, and Carolina beat them. So it's not like he was beating up just the Denver Broncos, right? So the fact that they turned their season around, I thought it was a no-brainer that they go with Wilks. I know overall his record at Arizona, he only coached one other time, didn't win his division. Oh, newsflash, either did Frank Reich, right? With Andrew Luck as the head, because I guess he had Luck when he was the head coach, not so much Peyton Manning. But you had Andrew Luck, man. The quarterback. You managed him so poorly, he retired. He pulled a Barry Sanders. He said, this guy doesn't know what the hell he's doing, because why else would he retire early? I'm always getting hurt. He's not helping me out. I'm just going to retire early. Steve Wilks, man, had 1 year in 2018, Arizona. They talk about like, oh, well, it's a little bit different for him because of the situation that Kingsbury did. Kingsbury hired or drafted Kyler Murray and brought in a totally different offense. Like, it's totally a different scenario. Steve Wilks had Mike Glennon as his quarterback, Matt. Mike Glennon. A lot of people probably don't even know who that is.
Wolfpack.
That's an NC State guy right there. Before Pitt started putting quarterbacks in the league, NC State was quarterback U, with random dudes starting around the league.
You mean Dangerous?
So, yeah, we're going to be getting to Russell Wilson here in a second. I just don't get it. I don't understand it. I hate the good old boys comment because you did the exact opposite, buddy. Like, you went and hired Frank Reich, who is a good old boy, and then you tried to play it off like, oh, we didn't want to hire a good old boy. It's like, what did Steve Wilks do that was a good old boy? He spent a lot of time in college. He was Notre Dame's coach, like defensive backs coach. Bowling Green, East Tennessee State, App State. Then he works his way up to the Bears, Chargers, or whatever, Panthers. Then he's like back at Missouri as their defensive coordinator before coming back as Carolina Panthers defensive coordinator or passing game, and then their interim head coach. I just don't understand why you wouldn't stick with a thing that was working. Your team's not going to immediately win. You're not going to bring in Tom Brady. Where's your franchise going to go? You're stuck with Sam Darnold or someone at quarterback. Why not bring back the guy that showed that he could win with him? Tom Brady's most likely leaving. The NFC South is going to be wide open. Why start over?
Yeah.
With a guy that hasn't won anything, and he's had 5 or 6 years as a head coach. Steve Wilks has had 1 with Mike Glennon as quarterback. Not a slap at Mike Glennon, but like you can't compare a guy with Andrew Luck with Mike Glennon, right? I think everyone will agree with me with that. So very disappointed with the Panthers down here, and that's another thing too, where it's like, hey, cheer for so and so team, be a diehard Panthers fan, right? They get an owner that's an idiot. You're supposed to, just be a diehard Panthers fan while you watch them make idiotic moves? Why are you giving money to that guy? It's kind of like the Pittsburgh Pirates situation all over again. Like, what are the Pirates doing that's making you spend money? What are the Carolina Panthers moves that they're doing that makes you want to stay a fan? His exact quote was, oh, we didn't want Wilks because he's a defensive guy. We wanted to get scoring. The reason is scoring brings eyeballs. And I paraphrased the Wilks thing because they didn't really say his name. Every year they put in new rules to benefit the offense. It's never going to end. That's what this league is about, getting eyeballs to watch it. So all the new rules are going to be offensive-minded, so we have to go with the offensive challenge first. He's the first offensive-minded coach in team history where he was a starting quarterback for the expansion franchise for their first 3 games. He wasn't even good enough to quarterback the whole year. I don't even know what to say.
I don't think there really is a whole lot to say. Like, I think you make the comment about the good old boys because people have been saying the NFL just keeps hiring all these retreads. So you just say it's almost like if you don't look into it at all and you know nothing about it, you just hear their quote that they're like, we're not hiring a good old boy. Like, that's something that you'd be like, yeah, we're not just following the way things normally go. But then, like, when you actually, like, for people that are knowledgeable of, like, where these coaches have been, it's like, no, you're pretty much just following, like, exactly what they thought you were going to do.
Yeah.
And there's situations where it's worked. Like, you look at how fast that turnaround's happening right now in Jacksonville with Peterson. And Wright was on that staff in Philadelphia and was a contributing part to that Super Bowl team. So, like, you can say, was it his quarterback mentorship with Peterson, or like what was that dynamic that they all kind of parted ways?
That's why, I don't know. There's two other. Let's get into the other two coaching hires, and we'll see what you think on these. The big one, Sean Payton to the Broncos. So there were rumors heated up that, and this is all within the past week before we even got to talk about it on the show, that the money amount that had been talked about, like $20 million plus for Sean Payton and Jim Harbaugh, was wrong. They ended up going back to Michigan to try to, I guess, do one last pitch after Harbaugh turned him down. And then there are rumors that Harbaugh was like, I don't want to take an interview, but I'm happy to, like, talk through and give you recommendations or something. So, like, he was giving him recommendations on coaching. So whatever ended up happening, they pulled the trigger and traded for Sean Payton, giving up 3 picks, a first, second, and I think a later third, right? And I honestly think, in terms of coaching, why not go for the guy? But Broncos, you've completely destroyed your team. You gave up a ton of picks for Russ and locked him in. And then you gave up even more picks for Sean Payton. By the time you can build around Sean Payton, Russell Wilson's going to be gone, right? He wasn't even good to begin with. What do you think?
Well, it's a gamble, but I think it's a gamble that could potentially pay off. Because with whatever salary, they don't have to overspend on an offensive coordinator. Because throughout his career, Sean Payton has been the play caller. So to that end, you almost get a 2-for-1. For the better part of his career, Sean Payton's had an older Drew Brees that we talked about on countless occasions, that struggled to drive the ball down the field, that maybe he tailors some of that stuff to what Russell Wilson can do. You look at some of the ways that these NFL teams can just accommodate to players, because a lot of it is similar concepts, just named differently or tagged differently. I think he has that experience that he could potentially pull Russell in the right place. Plus, I feel like they have a good bit of offensive talent. It's not like he's stepping into a situation where they're completely bare. But I think when you look at some of the people that were in that division, you're playing the Chiefs twice, you're playing the Chargers twice, and the Chargers just upgraded with hiring Kellen Moore as their offensive coordinator. I think that makes some of your schedule a little bit more difficult.
And that's where I'm kind of concerned, because, like, Sean Payton, you mentioned the Saints years, they surrounded Drew Brees with young talent, like even like a dynamic Reggie Bush. You bring in Michael Thomas later. Hey, let's bring in these young guys that we can draft early that give us speed to work with. But now you have no draft picks. So, like, you're not drafting a Michael Thomas caliber guy in the 7th round. Like, that would be almost extremely rare. So you're going to have to build through free agency, right? But then Russ has locked up a good bit of the cap there. So I'm curious to see what they're going to do. That's what I'm wondering. The rumor that they're talked about that they settled on over 20. According to ESPN, it says it was around 23 million, but Denver wasn't comfortable paying that with their new owner. So we'll see how big his contract's going to be. Which that's over double what John Gruden got. Remember? And Gruden wanted 10 years locked in. It took a controversy for him to get out of that contract, or the Raiders to get out of that contract with him. So if Payton's locked in for 10 years, then maybe the Russell Wilson stuff doesn't matter. They can win, and he can start to build in. Like, they should be able to win enough with Russ to make, like, possibly, the 7th seed? And I just think it's going to be tough because you're going to be behind the Chiefs. There's no way that they're going to be ahead of the Chiefs anytime soon. Then you're also looking up at the Chargers, I think, with Herbert, right? So at best, you're signing on to be the third best team in the division, depending on what the Raiders do. I would say it's an A+ for Denver because their position was already looking like garbage. And like you're saying, maybe they can hit on offensive numbers that win them games more than people expect. But I also think that the Russell Wilson deal really ties them up. So, I don't know. Russ hasn't reached the Super Bowl in, 8 years? Or 13 years? Sean Payton hasn't reached it in 13 or 8. Those are the two numbers. So, I guess Sean Payton would be 13, right? And Russell would have been 8 years?
Yep.
Crazy. What would you grade that one?
I'll give him a solid B. I mean, I feel like they had to give up multiple picks for him, but Tampa Bay showed it can work giving a bunch of picks up for the coach.
And that's why I would give him an A. I don't think there's any other way they could have went. You miss on Harbaugh. You have to get Sean Payton. Maybe the order was Sean Payton turned him down. Said he wanted over 20. They go to Harbaugh. He's like, I'm not leaving either because I think Harbaugh wants to go to a situation that's win now. And the Broncos ain't that. Like, there's other situations where he could just wait it out. Because Michigan's built to win next year. He could very easily win a national championship next year. And no one would bat an eye, right? With everyone coming back. They could very easily lose 3 games. We don't know. You never know with college injuries and stuff. But I think, like, for him, why go into a bad situation when you have a team that you built that can win right now? He wins the national championship next year at Michigan. Then he's a hot commodity for, like, hell, the Cowboys or something, right?
Yep.
He's already won with Kaepernick. Would Dak Prescott be that different? Cowboys aren't making a move this year, but wouldn't that be crazy? The last one is D'Amico Ryans to the Texans. They went the opposite and went with a defensive guy. He's been the defensive coordinator for the 49ers. But Saleh had been too, right?
Yes.
Saleh built that defense. I'm not sure exactly what else they could have done. They're not in a good situation, right? So I don't even think, did they even grade this position, ESPN? They're kind of just like, whatever. So it came down to he was waiting to hear about the Denver job is what the rumors were. Because they think that Denver would have eventually settled for him if they couldn't get Harbaugh or Payton. And so
that's a terrible way of putting it.
Well, wouldn't that be the truth?
Yeah.
They're not paying D'Amico Ryans $20 million a year, right? So I think if you pay a guy way less after there are rumors that they're going to offer Sean Payton and Jim Harbaugh over $20 million a year, and you're signing a contract that's like for 4, and they're like, oh yeah, I guess they did settle, right? And they're like, prove it, baby, prove it. So I don't know. I don't know. Does he even have any head coaching stats to compare with? I don't think, like, he's so young. I don't think he does, right? He's only 38 years old. So he's been the defensive quality control coach at the Niners. inside linebackers coach, defensive coordinator. This is his first head coaching job. I don't mind when someone's working up, right? That's why I use the term like settles. Like, you're settling for a guy that has no experience. Not a bad thing. That could always happen. I don't understand like why Eric Bieniemy wouldn't get an offer, right?
I almost feel like for him to really be legitimately considered, he needs to branch out somewhere else.
I didn't know if you were thinking the Harbaugh route where he's more or less saying like, I need a good situation for me. And the Texans and the Broncos aren't really it. Which makes sense, right?
Right. Well, I mean, I think every position you have to boil it down to, is it the right situation for you? You know, because if you walk into that wrong position, you know, even looking at Denver, like I feel like Sean Payton's walking into a scenario where they have running backs, they have receivers, they have a veteran quarterback. Like, you can build around some of those pieces. I don't know that they have everything that they need, but I feel like there's enough on paper that he feels like he can build around it, that you take a shot. If you're looking at a scenario where the team's gutted, where either you have an aging roster or you have a bunch of unknowns, you know, I think that kind of hurts you. When you look at the Texans, having Ryans come in is a good example of this, where they have all these picks from over the last couple of years with trading guys away, that if the guys aren't physically in the locker room right now, you can acquire what you need to build it through the draft.
And I think it's good for a new coach to kind of start fresh like that. I've just seen this story a lot where they don't give him time. Right?
Right.
So that's my only concern with, like, he played with the Texans, right? I think he did. So, yeah, for a good bit of his career. So you have a guy that's played there. He supposedly gets along great with ownership and stuff. He's young. Let him learn. Like, the Jets have been doing a pretty good job with Saleh, but, like, look at the Dolphins. There are rumors they're ready to fire their coach. Isn't it his first year? And they're doing pretty well until Tua got hurt. It's like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing at that point? And then they'll probably throw some BS reason under in the media so that other teams stay away. But it's like, all right, yeah, you don't have the track record yet. You get fired after 1 year for whatever reason. But I hope he does well. I don't really mind the Texans, and I always liked him as a player, so we'll see how he turns out. We'll also see what other head coaching jobs get turned over soon, right? There's still rumors about the Chargers maybe making a move. I think it's a little too late. Weren't they the ones that did the offensive coordinator situation?
Possibly.
I think they fired someone. I don't think they actually hired someone yet. They did. They hired Kellen Moore.
That's what I said earlier. Yeah, that's what I...
Yeah, sorry. I knew we talked about it, right?
Yeah.
Unless I'm just losing my mind. So, I don't think that head coaching job is going to be open. We'll see how the rest of the franchises play out. I think most teams are set now, right? I'll see if there's any more out there, but we'll have to talk about it next week a little bit more. You know, you can apply for some of these, dude. Oh, no, the Cardinals are still open. So are the Colts. So we could still have some movement here. The Cardinals interviewed Brian Flores. They also interviewed Sean Payton, Frank Reich, D'Amico Ryans. They didn't interview Steve Wilkes, though, which is kind of like a surprise. So, like, the Colts re-interviewed Jeff Saturday. Was he their interim head coach, I guess?
Yeah. And then he almost got himself fired.
Well, I feel like he's going to... They already interviewed him twice for this opening. So, like, are they just going to settle for him? They did interview Bieniemy. Did he interview in both spots? No, only the Colts interviewed him. He only did one, though, because, of course, he's coaching right now. But they interviewed a ton of people. I don't see Jim Harbaugh on this list, though. That's what everyone's saying. That, like, if the Colts don't fill their position, like, will they start going after Harbaugh in the 11th hour? Saying, like, hey, come here. I feel like at this point, though, do they just give Saturday a position? I don't know. Anything else you have for the NFL?
No.
I feel like I'm going crazy today. Anything you have for the final bell?
Let me double check here. And just the season, the NFL season's winding down, but definitely want to keep an eye out for the start of the USFL and XFL season are starting. I saw the Pittsburgh Maulers got away, and I think we touched on this last week. They went away from their big purple and orange uniforms to back the traditional Pittsburgh colors of black and gold. So maybe the Maulers' fortunes are going to change this season, going back with the rest of the city's colors.
Well, see, it works out perfect for us doing a football show now because the Super Bowl's in 2 weeks. We get an awesome Pro Bowl next week, I think, right? Really excited for that. And then the XFL starts the following weekend. So then we should have that go to the USFL start, right? So it's very close. I keep getting people telling me, like, hey, talk about the Pittsburgh Pirates. I'm like, why? Why do you guys want me to do that? This is like a troll at this point. I don't want to talk about the Pirates. I don't give a shit what the Pirates are doing. People are sending me like, hey, what do you think about the Pirates? They signed McCutcheon. Talk about McCutcheon this week. I'm not talking about McCutcheon. Are you serious? I complained about the Hall of Fame last week or whatever. But that's my final bell. Just saying, I don't care about the Pirates at this point. It's almost Super Bowl season, guys. What are you doing? Why are you even paying attention to the Pirates? Invest in the Braves. You can invest in the Braves. They have a stock. Be an owner. And then you can profit from your team's success. I was really hoping the Broncos would do that, and they didn't. Now they have an owner that didn't even want to pay for Sean Payton. Really great. Really great support he feels, probably. So that's my thing. You have anything else for the final bell?
Nope, that's it.
All right. Thanks for listening. Tell your friends, make sure you subscribe, and we will see you next week.